Okay, I said to him, let's get these two buildings vacated, and I don't want nothing to move from these buildings, just as they are right now, except the people should vacate a place that should be within 2 hours. And he called in the managers of both of those buildings, took them out of their offices, and gave them an order like a Gestapo would. You know, he got red in the face and gave them a direct order within 2 Stunden. It should be, and you ought to see the exodus. Men, women, and children leaving the places as they stand. As they left, my Jewish people moved right in. There were places where they were still cooking. There were places where there were radios on, clothing and everything. And I said to them, all of this belongs to you. This was just after the war. Don't forget, the war was over May the 8th and May the 9th, you know, and this was only 10, 11 days after, and everything was in a turmoil, you know, and I just took this privilege. I don't know what will happen, but I figured that whatever I do for my Jewish people, you have to hop around. The Russians were pulling machines out of industrial machines out of factories. The French were raping women, the Moroccans. And I was taking care of my Jewish people. So I came and I took over this building, and I put in there some 200 Jews that come from one shtetl, one little town called Radomer Jews. They have, out of 30,000 in that little town, there were 30,000 Jews, only 3,000 survived. And they have groups in Israel. They have a club in Israel. They have a club in Toronto, in New York, in Montreal, and also in Detroit. And the people that are in Detroit and some who are in Toronto and in Israel are people that were among the 200. So, you know, I'm their adopted rabbi, you know, their leader. And so those Radomer Jews moved in and they stayed there, and I supplied them with food and clothing and everything, with all their needs, until such time that help came along, you know, from other sources. Now, after my pulling out those Germans out of those apartments, I was reported to this Commander Dawson. See, that's why I go back to Dawson.
You remember his first name, Dawson?
Clarence Dawson. And I was reported to this commander. He was a full colonel in rank. And he said to me, how dare you do the things that you have been doing? After all, we have to show them democracy. And just because we are the victors and we have liberated them, we have to treat them like human beings and not use the same Nazi tactics that they've been using, and you've been certainly demonstrating it by changing all this. And I listened to him closely, and I said to him, well, where would you suggest I take these people, Colonel? And he says to me, there are some barracks, German barracks, right at the outside of the city that were actually bombed out, you know, and I should take those people in those barracks. I said, sir, they were, I said, living in concentration camps between 5 and 6 years, and after we have liberated them, the Germans should live in these beautiful apartments with all the conveniences, and these people who have suffered Sig's home for no fault of theirs, just because, as I say, this tyrant Hitler has driven them from their homes and have taken them prisoner and tortured them for 6 years, they have to still live under those terrible conditions. I said, sir, I said, I cannot turn my back to my people. And I saluted him, turned around, and walked right out. And sure enough, it wasn't within 1 day that I was reported to my commanding general. General Beres called me. And
what's his first name?
His name was Walter Beres. General Walter Beres.
How would you spell that?
B-U-R-R-I-S. B-U-R-R-I-S. And there I was a little frightened, because, you know, I've been with the same division when they were activated, and when they just started to build a division. And here we are already towards the end of the war, so we are almost being deactivated. Of course, we were anticipated to leave for Japan. Mm-hmm. So I was called in to General Beres, and I knew what it was all about. I had an idea what it was all about. And I walked into General Beres, and there's General Beres sitting down. He was a red-headed gentleman from Virginia, very southern gentleman from Virginia, and truly a gentleman, a heart of gold. Of course, he knew me as the Jewish chaplain in the division. Among 15 chaplains, I was the Jewish chaplain. So we had occasions to meet at various functions. And he says, chaplain, and there he has a list, I tell you, as long as my arm. You have done this, and you have done this, and this, and this, and a list, and without authorization,
And he reads me the whole Megillah of even taking out trucks and everything. It seems like he says also the quartermaster supplies and you know, and which is all true, you know, and I'm standing there at attention as he's reading all the charges against me, and I'm standing at attention. Yes, sir. And yes, sir. He says, "What do you say, chaplain?" I said, "Sir, I have done all this," and I started to cry. I just broke down. I just started to weep. You know, I just couldn't take it. I said, "Sir," I said, he looked at me and said, "Oh," he says, "Calm yourself down, chaplain." And he takes out his silver cigarette case and hands me a cigarette, and he says, "Sit down." He says, and I sat down. He said, "Just calm yourself." And I told him, I said, "Sir, I'm sure you visited the concentration camps. You've been in various, and you've seen how much my people have suffered." And I said, "What can I, what should I do as to my brethren?" I said, "Turn away from them when you see them walking down the street barefooted, no place to lay their head, no place to eat, men, women, and even few small children." I said, "After all the suffering they have endured," I said, no one pays attention to them, and all they can get is just a couple slices of bread from Orna." I said, with some coffee. I said I had to do something to help them, and so I had to give them a place where to stay and some food, supply them with some food, and we have plenty. I said, in the quartermaster, and everything you said, sir, is true. I've done this, and I'm willing to pay the penalty. And I said, if it is your wish, sir, then I will ask you to transfer me to a rear echelon unit, because to stand as close to the picture as I am right here and not to do anything, I could never endure it. I said, "I try to serve the 100 Infantry Division to the best of my ability." "Oh," he says, "we know your record." He says, "Well, chaplain, let me tell you," he says, and he smokes his cigarette, and I'm trembling. I don't know what he's going to say. I don't want to leave my unit. I still want to help my people. I still want to help. I got 1,100, you know, by this time, of course, I don't have 1,100 Jewish soldiers, but I still have a lot of Jewish personnel. And I want to help primarily these people. And he begins to tell me, "Well, I've been in, they took us," he says, "with the planes to the various areas of concentration camp, and what I have seen is something dreadful." And he continued to talk for half an hour of the terrible things that he has seen in the concentration and the degradation that the people have been subjected to. And he was so upset. And he says, "Well," he says, "Chaplain," he says, "let me tell you," he says, "you go ahead and do what you're doing, but," he says, "be careful, don't get caught." He says, "and I'll keep one eye closed," he says, "but don't get caught, will you please? Don't get caught," he says. So I continued to do this until I was transferred until our unit came back to the States.
When was that?
That was that was at the end in, September, October, about November of 1945. That was already after the holidays. In November, it was after the holidays, and everything was calm already. They were discharging already personnel, sending them back to their... I came back because my mother was sick, and it was an emergency. Of course, she died. It came just in time. And I remained in the service. I was transferred to Gardiner General Hospital in Chicago, and I stayed there as a chaplain there, and then, and of course, I was discharged at the end of 1946.
Mm-hmm.
Now, what?
Were there any other aspects of the DP situation? You had set up 3 hospitals.
Those are not hospitals. They were places where they stayed. Katz Sanatorium, Geppingen, and Esslingen. In addition to that, going back to the English Brigade, you know, that Jewish brigade that came to Israelis, you know, that came, and they came in, you know, with the Jewish brigade, you know, that with the English army. Right. They would come back with their trucks, you know, after delivering the supplies.
What are we talking about? What months? What
that was in the month of May and June. May and June of 1945.
Okay.
They would come in June of 1945. They would come in on a Friday, and then they would stay overnight and leave on a Saturday morning. And you know, on Friday, my Jewish personnel would come in. If you recall, earlier in my dissertation here, I related to you that I used to tell the men when they come to services to bring everything that they can lay their hands on in the way of ammunition and everything else. So these people would come in with boxes of things, of grenades, of machine guns, German burp guns. Because you see, all those weapons were stacked in the middle of the street and later burned. And they were able to go up to and pick up anything you want, anything they wanted.
This was highly illegal, by the way.
No, it was legal. At first it was legal, yeah, because, they would get it, they put it in there. It was illegal as far as what I was doing was illegal. What was illegal, to tell them to bring it to me and then transfer it over to them, that was an QT.
Did anybody ever?
But
the general didn't know about it.
Nobody knew about it. That was not hidden either. You know what I mean? You weren't supposed to do that. There were orders that weren't supposed to handle all these stuff because, first of all, there was bound to be casualties, horsing around, fellas, throwing a grenade or something blown up. There would be a lot of that, and we didn't want to. So they said off limit. They said all these areas are off limit where there's weapons of all kinds. Well, I told these fellas to bring in whatever they laid their hands on. And on a Friday night in this Eskin house, in the basement, and it was a huge place. It was heaped, just tons and tons of stuff, and these English, the Jewish brigade would used to put it on a number of their trucks and cover it up, with their what do you call it? These truck covers, and they would cover that up, and then of course the rest of the trucks. They would say to me, if there's anyone who wants to go to Italy, to the Hachsharaz, that was the Jewish camp, that was before they went to the United States, to Israel. So some of them didn't want to go on these trucks, but others grabbed the opportunity, they wanted to go to Israel. A lot of them refused to go, they wanted to go to the United States. But many of them, on a Saturday morning, was call time. And of course I have pictures of those too, when they had, when these men, after service or no service. My service didn't mean anything to me. I didn't care about a service. All I would do is, who is going? They should raise their hand, ready to go. And we used to pack these trucks,
On Shabbos, you packed the trucks?
On Shabbos, we'd pack up these trucks and they would take
before or after services?
Before the services and during the services, all morning long. All morning long, because a lot of them had their supplies. I forgot about the services even. I didn't care whether I had a service or not. Friday night I had a service, because they would bring me the stuff. Saturday morning, I had many of these local people, the Michelingen, the German, the liberated Jews. For them, I would have sometimes 300-400 people that were there for a service. But my first objective was to see the brigade off with ammunition and all that. And then, you see, I had another difficulty. And even being an Orthodox rabbi, I'm not very happy to put this on the tape, but if you want to know you want to know the truth, the emes, I did something even that I even wrote on Shabbos to get them to the border, to get the people over on the other side to Italy.
Because you figured
the English couldn't take them over because they had to have passes, and there were guards. The Italians would not let them in, but there's a way to get around, and that is by buying them off. And there was nothing more that they wanted was the Eisenhower jackets. You give to an Italian an Eisenhower jacket, and you can have everything and anything you want. And so I used to ride with my assistant in the Jeep and lead the convoy with these people, even though they were British, but nevertheless they were DPs, you see. And the Italians wouldn't let them in unless there was they had certain passes, and so I used to make out passes, and also with the same stamp, with a $50 stamp, and write out in Italian and in English, that these people and I, by the authority given to me by the military governor of the city of Stuttgart and by the commanding general of Division 150, I hereby am authorized to take this personnel across the border to the Italian side.
And you would sign
and I would sign my name and put a stamp on there. And then, not my name, but I would sign the name from the commanding general, and then take them over, and then hand them watches. They wanted watches, watches.
Mickey Mouse watches?
No, these army watches. We had army watches, quartermaster watches, and also these Eisenhower jackets. I had access to that because I had Jewish boys in the quartermaster, and I told them requisition them. That's also Eisenhower jacket, no problem. I used to go up to a Jewish man and say to him, give me your jacket, and I got the jacket. And that's all. Then the man, because this was expendable stuff,
Right.
Then he used to go to the quartermaster, say, I lost my jacket. He might say, there was no problem with that. See? So we used to, and that's the way we bribed the guards, and we got these men over to the Hachsharaz to Italy.
Right.
Now this didn't last very long. I had to do it about 3 or 4 times. But there's one one thing I want to relate to you, something, one experience that I will also never forget along this line. When we were still fighting before the war was over yet, it was almost over. We took a small town near Heilbronn, Germany, and we were told that there's a large camp, a labor camp, not a concentration camp, but a labor camp, mostly Polish people there. But I was told that there were Jews there also.
When was this?
That was in the month of April of 1945, and they told me that there was still that there may be Jews there. So as I said, I'm still looking for my brethren. So I took my assistant, but this time I took along a couple of soldiers with me. Altogether, we were 1, 2, 3, 4 of us. 4 of us, 2 soldiers in the back, 1 in my seat, and I was my driver, and we drove out to this labor camp. We came to the gate, and of course they let us in, and we were just looking around. Of course, we already took the town. The town has been taken. They know they're going to be soon liberated, but it's not yet. You know, the people are still there. They're holding them in there because they just can't leave out 7,000, 8,000 people right out in the wild like wild animals. You know. So they kept them there, and the Americans came in and brought in food and everything else. And I was looking around there, and one Jew walks over to me, and I see a Jewish ponim. You know, you can't miss him. He got a hold of me. Also, wouldn't started to talk. I mean, and they said, the Americans here, don't worry, everything's going to be good for you. I'm going to take care of you. Don't go away. He says, I want to tell you. He says, there are some 20 Jewish girls that are used for prostitution purposes in one of the barracks over here. And you see that building over there? That's the building where all the Polacks are using them for sexual purposes. He says, and they're right in there.
And they're still going on.
Ratavedze, save them. When I heard this, I think that although I carried with me a weapon, I always carried with me a 22 and a 35. The 22 I used to have in my glove, you know, inside of my glove, because I was driving with an open Jeep, and sometimes at nighttime, you know, blackout, and you never knew when the sniper would come out. My assistant had a rifle, but I had to have a weapon too, so I had an automatic 35, and I had a 22, and the 35 I keep in my pocket, and the 22 I held in it's a small little weapon, held in my glove. So I rushed out there, and with my assistant, and I said to the 2 other Jewish men, big, husky, strong fellas, 6-footers. I always pick big fellas because I figured I never know when I will have to have an encounter, not a physical encounter, but I have to schlep, steal, take, schlep, because I always took something. I need this I used to drive by any kind of a store that looked like a semblance of a store. I immediately walked in to see what I can take in the way of food or clothing. You know. So I go in there, and I said to 2 of my men, I said they should stand they should stay on one side of the barracks had the 2 entrances. The back, you could go out to the back and to the front. You go into the front and go out to the other way. So they should keep the door on one side closed, I said, and the other side we're going to close up, my assistant and I. And the men, I said, will come out through there. And I said, when they come through there, I said, remember, take the butt of the rifle. Those are, and at that time they had carbines, you know. And I said, and as they go out, I hit them. I say, hit them over the head, cripple them. I said, so they should fall. Knock them out, I said. Just one by one, I say. We're going to send them out one by one. And just lay them out, I say. Just slam them over the head or anything. Just lay them out. And I want you to know, when I walked in from one end of the door, and of course my assistant was standing by the door. He wouldn't let anybody out from the outside. And I was walking through, and I looked into one of the rooms. The most dreadful things I've seen. Of course, they started to walk out, you know, the Polacks started to run out. But I could see these women. I want to tell you, their faces were bleeding. They're puffed up, you know, they were beating them too. There were 4 in one room. Can you imagine? They were you know, the bunks, double bunks, upper bunks and lower bunks. And they were using, those animals were using 4 at a time were walking in there. 21 girls were there. And I took them out, and I took them to a hospital, a military hospital, and I had Jewish doctors take care of them. And then I took them to this cat sanitarium, and it was there that the Jewish doctors used to come and treat them until they're well enough, you know, where they were able to get around, you know. And of course, from then on, I don't know what happened to them, you know, after I left. But while they were there, we took care of them and brought them back to health. And of course, I ran into many of Jewish TB. In one particular place, there was a TB sanitarium. There were 60 Jews there in that sanitarium.
Where was this?
It was near Stuttgart, a small town called Goldingen, Germany, and they were there, 60 of them, and it may be interesting to note, there's one is in Montreal that I married them, and they're living now in Montreal, a couple, and they have children, and I went for a bar mitzvah, to their son's bar mitzvah just a few years back. Now, what should I tell you?
Do you remember when this incident took place?
The women of
the women first, and then the sanitarium.
You mean the sanitarium?
Yeah.
That took place in the month of, let's see, it was the month of this. Of course, the labor camp was in the month of the end of April.
Mm-hmm.
The end of April of 1945. And that's the girls, you know. That's the sanitarium, the girls. The sanitarium was in the month of May. I think about the 15th of May.
I'm very interested in a lot of the things that you told me, and therefore I want to be able to be as exact as possible, so that
You'll have to rehash many of these things and put them in chronological.
that's not the problem. I'm concerned here in terms of exact dates, if possible,
Mm-hmm.
so that anything that you might be able to, because a lot of the things that you did say are the type of things that will be definitely used.
Mm-hmm.
In other words, I can tell by the type of things that are said whether I will use them for sure, or
Yeah.
and so
The one that I told you about, the church using the Jewish the tombstones for sidewalk purposes is worthwhile. Now, if I can find,
I find all of this material.
If I can find some of this for the statement made by the Burgermeister that it will be removed within 24 hours by the order, and it stipulates so. If I can, by the order with his stamp, with the Burgermeister stamp on it, by the order of Captain Herbert Eskin of the United States Army.
Mm-hmm.
See, it wasn't Chaplain, but by Captain Herbert Eskin, by the order of the tombstone will be moved within 24 hours to the cemetery. See?
Now, were you involved in packages at all? Sending of packages?
No.
From the States?
No.
Nothing?
No, I had nothing to do with packages.
What about sending letters to people in the United States?
Oh yes, this was standing operating procedure. As soon as we got a hold of a DP, the first thing we'd ask him, do you have any relations? If you have relations, where are they? If you, even the city, immediately we would send either through the Red Cross or direct, and not only special, but as fast as we could get over there. The fastest mail to get over there, to get in touch with the relatives, to tell them that so-and-so. And then we would also send in lists, you know, to the Jewish Welfare Board, and telling them that the following people are under my supervision.
Did you have any contact with any other chaplains during this period? Jewish chaplains?
Jewish chaplains, yes, I had a contact with Max David Eichhorn, but not, it was during the war yet. After the war, I had no contact with Jews. I was strictly a loner in the city of Stuttgart. There was no Jewish chaplain anywhere, because most of those who were chaplains in the war were trying to do some work with the DPs, you know.
Did anybody visit you during that period of time?
During that, no one visited me during this time. No one. I did. No one yet, because you see, this was the very early stages, and within the first 60 days, actually, after the war, where we had to supplement everything, whatever the government or the military has done, which was very little for these people. That was nothing, practically nothing at all. UNRWA was the only one.
The JDC wasn't there?
JDC was not there yet, no.
So you had no contact whatsoever?
No contact whatsoever the first 60 days, and this was the most important days, because these people, here they are free, but no help, no one gives them a helping hand. They don't know which way to go, which way to turn, and I thought by setting up this center was a blessing to them, because they can come and get together and talk and discuss. And we used to stay up till 1, 2 o'clock in the morning. They would tell me, droves of them, sending each one telling some of their experience, and then after they get through talking to me, they say, and now you've heard, you think a lot, you haven't heard nothing yet, you know. Each one telling the tragedies of what they're suffering, they're going to go. Well, they had to have a place where they would look for some help and assistance, and also assurance, and a feeling of having a little bit talking, you know, faith that help will come. From where will come the help? And I was telling them the help will come from the United States, and I told them we have hundreds of millions of dollars that is designated for assistance to give them, and as soon as the gates will be open and permission will be given, and as soon as the war was still going on in Japan, and as soon as this war will clear away and all this turmoil, I said, your assistance will come, I said, and all the clouds, the dark clouds will be removed. I gave him the pep talk, I gave him bitach, and I gave him faith. All the hardships and the suffering that will be removed from your lives, and though it cannot mend your tragedies and your suffering, but at least we will try to liquidate as much as we can, and so that for a better future for you, see. And I say American Jews are going to come to your help and to your assistance. And this is the hope that I could give him. This the only hope. And this was the source was, of course, the Jewish chaplain and my headquarters.
What do you think would have happened without the presence of chaplains?
Well, in my humble opinion, what would have happened? I wouldn't say that their lives, God forbid, they would lose their lives. But I will say this to you: that many of them would have been lost to us in many ways. You know, I think their help would have come, but it would come a little bit too late. They would lose the hope and faith and try to assimilate and try to completely. It would be a tremendous letdown. Put it this way.
Mm-hmm.
And I think the rabbis, if anything, they've done is to retain that spirit, that spark, of hope. And that was a tremendous thing for them, to be able to tell them that, and to also, not only to tell them, but to render actually assistance to them. When a man is let out from hell, and all of a sudden he's free, and he doesn't know which way to turn, and here's a man that gets a hold of your hand and gives you direction, and tells you which way to go and where to stay and what's going to happen. It's a tremendous thing, and he's in a world lost completely. He doesn't know what right he has, what rights he doesn't have. And so, and how he'll be treated, he's still afraid, he's frightened. He was still afraid the Germans, may kill him or hurt him, and he's a loner.
Yeah.
And there, to get them together in a group, and then also the question of getting the American military to recognize them too. There was a tremendous, there was the so-called barrier, The German military personnel were interested in having a good time. They were looking for the German women, and they were looking for women generally, even Jewish girls, even the Jewish women they were looking for. And they didn't give a damn about these DPs walking around, they didn't care. And these Americans had to also be educated to the fact that to give them a little helping hand and have a little consideration. And this all combined, the overall service that the Jewish chaplain have rendered, and not because I'm a chaplain, to the Jewish people right after the Holocaust, the catastrophe that occurred in Europe and the entire world, but particularly in Europe and in Germany, it was something that it's indescribable. Whatever I have done is in my humble opinion, was done by other chaplains even more so. We had chaplains who had access to many things, where I didn't have it. I was very limited. I was a division chaplain, you see. I was confined to my area division, but I was fortunate enough to have a commanding general who gave me the leeway and told me to go ahead, to a point where even my inspector general, the IG inspector general, used to go with me to the jeep to the various areas where I had the Jewish living, and he used to applaud me and praise me for the work that I've done, and then report it to the general. I was with Chaplain Eskin, and this is what he did here, and this is what he did. That when I had that much privilege, I was able. If I wouldn't have had that, I don't know what would happen. I don't think I could stand it. I would really ask my general to transfer me out of the area to somewhere in an isolated, so that I would not have to see all the hardships that these people would be confronted with. But the good Lord has, you see, at that time, I was a young, healthy, physically healthy, sport type of a man, a starke Herman, and I was a single man, and I surrounded myself with people who were dedicated to the Jewish people, the young men that didn't care what happened with them. They would even fire and kill if necessary. And we were like a gang. We were actually a gang, and I'm telling you, we handled ourselves for a period. There was a period of about 30 days that we didn't care what happened. We had to get supplies, and when we got into a village, this was not once or twice. That we used to go in the village and get the farmer to kill a cow. It was really something. Their cattle. It was really something. Butcher them right there and stand right there until it's peeled and skinned, off, and then take and guts out, and then take the whole thing out and disappear with it. This was, and don't forget, it wasn't killed kosher either. You see, but what can you give? You got sick people with blown up bellies, starved from starvation. You're going to ask about kosher. You just got to give them food, and the Americans were not ready to give them supplies, because they said we have only supplies to supply the American military personnel. We're not here to supply the civilians. So UNRWA came in, and UNRWA used to give them a can of this, and a can of Spam, and a can of, and a half a loaf of bread, and all this. What is for a person that is starved? It's 1,500 calories is for a starvation diet. They need at least 3,000, double that. So we had to supplement that. And this is the way we've done this. And we've done this, so I've done this for at least a period of 90 days. And after that, of course, other organizations came in with supplies, and they took over. And the military cleared up, and civilians, and then there were other agencies. Not only Jewish agencies, non-Jewish agencies came in, and they also permitted the DPs to work in various, encampments, So we had them in the mess halls, So we had them working here and there, and when you give a Jewish a chance, he takes care of himself. He's able to take care of himself. So within a very short time, I saw already some of my people already driving cars, and I asked him, well, how did you get it? He said, I'm a partner in a business with a German. A German was so scared that he took him in as a partner, and he's already in business, he says. He's already in business. I'm a half partner with a German in a business. This business formerly belonged to a Jew. The Jew was sent to a concentration camp. The German took it over, and he's afraid that it'll be taken away from him, particularly with all the Americans, and he's bound to be prosecuted, so he was frightened. He took a Jewish partner, to protect his own skin, and his business. And this way, this man all of a sudden become already a half businessman in an established business, half partner. Well, we had a few of those incidents. But by and large, the Jewish chaplains in time of the war have done a magnificent job. Of course, there were chaplains later that came in to replace them, after the war.
Who replaced you?
There was a fellow by the name of Chaplain Ginsberg, and he replaced me in Stuttgart right after the high holidays. The high holidays was September, October. I had there, this too was very interesting. In Stuttgart, there's what they call the Landstheater. It's like an opera house.
Mm-hmm. Like an opera house. Comes the high holidays, and there they had an opera going, There was scheduled an opera, and here I have my Jewish personnel. In addition to that, I got these Jewish DPs, and I got to have a place where to conduct my high holiday services. And I also had a choir of about 10 Jewish boys that I taught, to help me to sing. I was the chazan. I'm not a chazan, but I had a good voice. And I was able to daven like a Baal Tefillah, but I also had a choir, about 10 men, and they helped me out certain songs because I had a couple of, and don't forget, I had about 75 Jewish boys there who kept kosher all through the war. And people who learned, they even learned Talmud there. I had classes, so I had knowledgeable young men from New York. It was a New York outfit, a New York outfit. You could imagine, it must have been about Jews were anywhere between 10 and 11%, and there were about 30% Catholic, Italians there. Well, I had a choir, and I needed a place where to conduct my Rosh Hashanah Yom Kippur services. So that was in Stuttgart, and there's a beautiful Landstheater, and there's an opera going on, a show going on. I said, what the hell? The Germans are going in there to the opera. This is my attitude. I'm a very rough, you're in the infantry, and the infantry takes precedence over anything. So what the hell? They are going to be in the opera. Well, I gotta be outdoors under the sky to conduct services. I said, so I decided to take over the opera, and I didn't ask any questions. And I go in there, and I go into the management, and we tell the chutzpah of a Gestapo. The Germans know only one way, and that's you got to talk to them. You can look down with authority, speak authority, and with strength. And I walk in, always surrounded with a couple of men, and rifles with the carbines. You walk in, and I give the order, and I take over the theater
for Rosh Hashanah, and I take over the theater for Yom Kippur, and this is such a beautiful opera. I think there are about 4 or 5 balconies, you know, like you have in New York, you know, what's that, the Opera House?
Yeah.
In the Opera House.
Carnegie Hall.
No, the Opera House there, where the opera is, the Metropolitan Opera.
Metropolitan,
Yes, similar type, you know.
yeah.
It's like this, you know, and there a beautiful stage. And I had a Torah, you know. I had a Torah. Incidentally, I had found 21 Torahs that I found during the battles in small towns that I gathered, and I sent them to Paris, in French, you know, and to Paris. And in Paris, they put them in the largest synagogue there. What they call what are those bankers there? The Rothschild, Baron de Rothschild Synagogue, and that's where I placed it. But I also always kept one for myself because I used it. I use that on Saturdays. I use it sometimes on a Monday, on a Thursday. It depends where the situation was, you know. And I had there in here, I had the choir, and we were singing there. All those people I'll never forget. I will never forget when I sang Kol Nidre. You know, the Kol Nidre is only one melody. Whether you are Richard Tucker, or whether you are an ordinary Baltfiller, it's the same melody, the same awe-inspiring, haunting, you know, Kol Nidre, and in the choir, you know. And you ought to hear the cry from those people. They actually drowned me out. The weeping, the crying, the givein, the gishrei, you know, from the people when they heard the Kol Nidre. I'll never forget this. Never. I have pictures of this, you know, incidentally. Some take me. Well, I took over this Irish theater, and I was there during Rosh Hashanah, and then the whole day of Yom Kippur, and I was reprimanded for that too, but I didn't give a damn because by that time already I knew where I stand with my general. I knew that as long as it's all right with him, I told him that, how can you keep these? These are for GIs. I said, not for the DPs. These are my military. They come first. I say the Germans should enjoy their sitting around and watching an opera while my men are going to stand down there without seating, stand for 4 and 5 hours. It's a long service. It's a whole day service. I say, they're going to sit down on the ground while I'm conducting services. I say, this is not a field service. And they went along with me, and we emptied out the opera house, and so we had our services there. So he came right after the high holidays. A fellow by the name was Ginsberg. But my unit was already pretty well cleared out, you know. He just took over the area. He was a young man who stayed there for a while. I don't think he stayed there very long because, you know, the armies were coming in, being brought back, you know, very fast. Many of them were being discharged, you know, and sent back to the States. Well, what else? There's so many other stories, but my mind is just loaded with so many things. But I know that
Keep telling me. That's all right.
Of course, the suffering that was related to me by these is tremendous. I think the books have been written about it. There's no need for me to tell you.
Right.
But those things are well known. It's already been. Those things have been recorded, and
I'm more concerned with incidents
that
you were involved in.
The burials, you know, for instance, the Jewish person. I told you that 25. We used to bury as many as 25 Jews. And we used to bury as many as 25 Jews a day, and it got to a point, you know, where we used to have so-called mass burials, where I would go to the cemetery with the Catholic and Protestant chaplain, and they had. If I had 25, it's obvious that they had them by the hundreds, and particularly at a cemetery called Epinal, France. Epinal, in Epinal, Epinal, France. It's a large American military cemetery, and this I must say to you that. And I must tell you this. I have never had a so-called a mass service. To me, I used to conduct my prayers over the graves, over every grave. I didn't say so-called make a mole and name the name, but I went to every graveside and made the mole and said a capital Tillim, you know, because I knew every man that I lost. I knew him. I made it my business to know him, so I knew him and I knew his relations. I used to write letters to the parents. Every time a young man attended my service, I used to fill out a card and immediately notify his parents. Your son Abe was at my service on this and this date. He looks well. He participated in our Onyx Shabbat, and I'm going to see to it. Sometimes I used to include a little joke, saying, I'll see to it that he doesn't eat too much so he doesn't get too fat, but he looks well, don't worry about him. The good Lord will take care of him, and you'll hear from me later, and so on. So that those are the things, so I knew every man that was killed, and let me tell you something, there wasn't a grave that I did not shed a tear, because I knew these fellows and I knew their backgrounds. And to me it was a tragedy that it took me a long time to overcome, because I sensed very keenly these losses. We had, as a chaplain, we have sometimes problems with personnel. I must say to you that in handling so many Jewish young men, I have yet to come to a situation where I had a very serious problem with some Jewish conduct of some Jewish personnel.
How did they help you with the DPs?
It was a remarkable thing. That first of all, as usually the military personnel, Jewish personnel, used to look forward to some assistance from me. For instance, it wasn't much of a material things, but such as, did you get a package from home? We used to share it, Somebody used to get a salami. He used to say, 2 salamis, you don't need no 2 salamis, come on, take it, so Chank, I'll take it, there's the boys over there, We used to share it all. And when it came, that was before we encountered the DPs. But once we encountered the DPs, they kind of like abandoned their demands from me, and all they said to me is, what can we do? What do you want me to do? You want me to do, they were willing to give of themselves, Of course, some of them were tied down to their duties, they couldn't. But most of them have. For instance, I may cite the medics. The Jewish medics, we had them in the division, we had a medical unit.
These are the Jewish doctors you were talking about?
Jewish doctors, yeah.
Who took care of these?
Who took care of these. But these Jewish doctors not only took care, I had dentists that used to come after duty, and they used to take care of the dental work for my DPs at night. Sometimes work till 10, 11 o'clock at night, mind you, after duty hours. And they would take care of these people. I had doctors come in. At that time, penicillin, was very, very a new drug. It's something new, and it was the wonder drug. Penicillin was a wonder drug, and so they came around. And I think they used that even for those who had TB, cases at first. And so they came around with these various drugs, and the drugs was, also not permitted to be taken out, because drugs was an item, accountable. They had to, every time a man used to give it out, he had to write it down or make a receipt or sign for it. And I want you to know, and this is God's truth, that when I left, the Jewish doctor said to me, Chaplain, we're so happy that you're leaving, because we would all be court-martialed if we'd be here any longer. They were stealing drugs, I don't know by how many pounds of all kinds of drugs, and giving it to the DPs. So just imagine the service that the chaplain has done along that line to get the Jewish doctor, the contact, the liaison man between the doctors, and the sick people among the DPs.
You think that many of these GIs would have worked on their own for this?
No, they couldn't, because the GIs, don't forget, are confined to their duties. They just can't. A GI can't take off. He's on duty. He's accountable. He has to be accountable every minute while he's on duty. His sergeant's supposed to know where he's at, what he's doing. He's got to tell him where he was.
So you really had the cooperation of a lot of people.
Come up and say to the sergeant, I need this man. Well, okay, chaplain, go ahead, take him, see. Or I say to this man, look, get me some of the things, whatever you can, and I'll pick it up later, you see. I got the supplies. Now, as I said to you, I didn't have many problems with my Jewish personnel. I know I saved some lives of the Jewish personnel, but that I don't want to go into. Those are military things that I cannot disclose, but we've had some cases where Now, I am a chaplain, incidentally, with 30 years of service, in, both as active and reserve, and I'm a retired chaplain. And I
after the service, I have taken care of all the military installations in the state of Michigan. I was honored by being national chaplain of the Veteran of Foreign Wars of the United States, which is predominantly Goyim, and I would say 99 and 9/10% Goyim, over 3 million people who were veterans of foreign wars and served overseas. I was the first Jewish chaplain to be accorded this honor, incidentally. That was in the year of 1950.
Let's go into another tape because we're